Okay, we're live, and this is the last video I'm going to be making before Christmas. So, Merry Christmas, everyone who's going to watch this. And I'm just going to try and do Surah 59, which is entitled The Banishment. And the title refers to the banishment of the of the Banu Nadir tribe. Hi, Inky. Merry Christmas. And the Banu Nadir tribe, that was a Jewish tribe that was expelled from Medina by Muhammad. Merry Christmas to you too. It was a Jewish tribe that was expelled by Muhammad from Medina after he had already expelled the Banu Kanuka, which was the first tribe to be expelled. And this surah was ostensibly revealed to Muhammad to justify his actions. What he did, he basically, the background to this is he tried to extort money from the Banu Nadir in order to pay for a blood debt that he had contracted when some of his followers had murdered, as they were wont to do, murdered another tribesman. And the Banu Nadir they weren't really a party to this conflict. Muhammad's followers had just gone and killed someone. And instead of paying off the blood money himself, of course, Muhammad never forced his own followers to face punishment for their actions, their crimes. So he would pay a blood money, and this is sanctioned in the Quran. We went over that verse a long time ago. This is sanctioned in one of the first surahs. And instead of taking money from his own treasury, he decided to try and extort money from this Jewish tribe, the Banu Nadir, and they very reasonably refused to pay money because Muhammad's followers had killed someone in order to satisfy this debt. So he fabricated a claim that they were trying to assassinate him, or that he had a dream that they were trying to murder him. Therefore, he was entitled to expel them from Medina. And you see this pattern throughout the life of Muhammad. When he was weak and he had no other alternative, he was willing to relent and not attack his purported enemies, the people who were living among him and who had more power than he did. So when he was weak, he didn't attack them. Just like you'll see groups like Hamas or Muslim groups, they'll very often sue for peace or try to arrange an armistice or a hudna because they're losing a battle. So they'll agree not to attack, not to send rockets against Israeli civilians, not to commit terrorist attacks for a specified period of time, because they don't want to be wiped out, and they want to maintain their offensive capabilities. And this is something that Muhammad did. So they're patterning themselves after Muhammad. But once Muhammad gained enough power and he was able to expel or kill his enemies and defeat them militarily, he availed himself of that opportunity. And this was the case with the Banu Nadir. So he fabricated charges against them and then used those fabricated charges to attack and expel them, and basically continue the ethnic cleansing of Medina. And this is what the surah is. It's purportedly a revelation that Muhammad was given just justifying his expulsion of this Jewish tribe. So in verse 1, it says, "Whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth declares the glory of Allah, and He is the mighty, the wise. He it is who caused those who disbelieved of the followers of the book." So he's referring to the Banu Nadir here, to go forth from their homes at the first banishment. You did not think that they would go forth while they were certain that their fortresses would defend against them against Allah. But Allah came to them whence they did not expect and cast terror into their hearts. They demolished their houses with their own hands and the eyes of the believers before. Therefore, take a lesson, O you who have eyes. And had it not been that Allah had decreed for them the exile, He would certainly have punished them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have chastisement of the fire. That is because they acted in opposition to Allah and His apostle, and whoever acts in opposition to Allah, then surely Allah is severe in retributing evil. So again, you have, just like in the previous surah, you have him substituting himself in the place of who Muslims believe to be God. So it's not just Allah that you're disobeying or rejecting, it's Allah and His apostle. So Muhammad is, once again, he's arrogating to himself the power to be worshipped. And this is something, in fact, Mohammed Qasim denied it in the last stream, but Muslims do worship Muhammad. And the evidence is in the Quran. You just have to read the Quran in order to understand this. And look around you in the world. Whenever you have blasphemy prosecutions or people being attacked for blasphemy, it's always in relationship to them critiquing or attacking or impugning the integrity of Muhammad. You very rarely, almost never, will you see someone being prosecuted for blaspheming Allah or denying Allah's existence. Oh, Merry Christmas, Nate. Glad you made it. You never see that happening in places like Pakistan or Egypt or any Muslim country, any country that operates according to Sharia law. Almost all of the blasphemy prosecutions are based around attacking Muhammad. And the reason is because Muslims worship Muhammad, and this is why they were called Mohammedans. It wasn't an epithet. It was because this was how Europe and the West encountered Islam at first. They encountered people who venerated and worshipped Muhammad. That was the chief feature of their lives, and it still is. That's when you ask anyone who's not a Muslim what distinguishes a Muslim from a non-Muslim, they won't say they won't cite the 5 pillars of Islam or the 6 articles of faith, or say they go to mosques. Maybe a few will, but the distinguishing characteristic of Muslims that distinguishes them from non-Muslims is their veneration of Muhammad, and the fact that they treat any critique or legitimate criticism of Muhammad as an attack on their identity. So when Muslims say that they don't worship Muhammad, they're simply not being truthful, or they're denying inwardly. They're denying something that is at the heart of their sacred texts. So in 5, it says, "Whatever palm tree you cut down or leave standing upon its roots, it is by Allah's command that He may abase the transgressors. And whatever Allah restored to His apostle from them, you did not press forward against it any horse or a riding camel, but Allah gives authority to His apostles," notice the plural here, "against whom He pleases, and Allah has power over all things. Whatever Allah has restored to His apostle from the people of the towns, it is for Allah and for the apostle, and for the near of kin and the orphans and the needy and the wayfarer, so that it may not be a thing taken by turns among the rich of you. And whatever the apostle gives you, accept it. And from whatever he forbids you, keep back, and be careful of your duty to Allah. Surely Allah is severe in retributing evil." And again, he's referring to Allah here, but notice the primacy given to Muhammad in just in these two verses alone, he's equating the wishes or the desires of Allah with the desires of Muhammad. And this is why you have an entire surah in the Quran entitled The Spoils of War, and describing how the spoils of war are reserved to Allah, but in effect, they're really reserved for Muhammad, because Muhammad is the person on earth who's an avatar of Allah. He's basically the representation of Allah on earth, and this is what Muslims believe. And they believe it because it's in the Quran itself. It is for the poor who fled, those who were driven from their homes and their possessions, seeking grace of Allah and His pleasure, and assisting Allah and His apostle. These it is that are the truthful. And those who made their abode in the city and in the faith before them love those who have fled to them, and do not find in their hearts that excuse me, their hearts a need of what they are given, and prefer them before themselves, though poverty may afflict them. And whoever is preserved from the niggardliness of his soul, these it is that are the successful ones. And this is interesting too, because well, it, it contrasts the 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 it contrasts Muhammad's repeated invocations, descriptions of how you should give to how you should do zakah, and you should give to the wayfarer, this and that, and expend your resources. But it's always grounded in the context of expending your resources for Islam, and particularly Muhammad. And this is why Muhammad repeatedly says that people who don't give to his cause, don't help him to go out and conquer enemy nations and tribes, and don't advance the cause of Allah through money, they're going to be punished, and they're going to be they're basically consigned to the same realm as unbelievers, people who are non-Muslims, Muslims who aren't willing to give freely to his military campaigns and military adventures. These Muslims are no better than unbelievers, i.e., non-Muslims. So you see this repeatedly throughout the Quran, and it just speaks to Muhammad's avaricious nature, and the fact that this is a cult designed to control the actions of everyone underneath it, and all of their actions should be directed at enhancing the prestige of Muhammad, or helping him gain military victories. Oh, happy Christmas, Alejandro. So it continues in verse 10, and those who came after them say, Our Lord, forgive us and those of our brethren who had precedence of us in faith, and do not allow any spite to remain in our hearts towards those who believe. Our Lord, surely thou art kind, merciful. And this is interesting, because this is another aspect of Islam that is really unscriptural when you stop and look at it. There's a hadith. Now, many Shia Muslims will reject this hadith as inauthentic, but the vast majority of Orthodox Muslims, of Sunnis, most Muslims around the world will consider this a valid hadith. And it's the hadith of 10 with glad tidings of paradise. Now, the 10 mentioned are the first 4 caliphs, or the rightly guided caliphs within Islam, the Rashidun Caliphate. So it would be Abu Bakr, Muhammad's successor, Abu Bakr, Uthman, Umar, and Ali, who is revered by the Shia and was thought to be the the justified inheritor of Allah, of Muhammad's estate, his caliphate. So you have the four rightly guided caliphs and six companions of Muhammad. So the Hadith of 10 with glad tidings of paradise refers to these 10 people, and it claims that each one of them is in paradise. So there's no eternal security in Islam. If you read through the Quran, even Muslims are are um, are fearful of being sent to hell. So you can observe the five pillars of Islam and the six articles of faith and still be sent to hell. There's no guarantee of eternal security. So Muslims are always trying to find a way to ensure their salvation. And one of the primary ways is the emphasis on martyrdom. The fact there's no real guarantee that you'll enter paradise unless you're a martyr. But Muhammad also said these 10 companions of his, these 10 companions, the first four caliphs that succeeded him, and his six other companions will enter paradise. Not only are they guaranteed, but they're in paradise. So this hadith this hadith is an example of what you see in this verse here, where it says, "Those of our brethren who had precedence of us in faith." So in Islam, there are certain people who are prioritized over other Muslims. So you can be a very devout Muslim and not unscrupulously adhere to all of the guidelines in the Quran and the Hadith, and try to be an exemplar, and you're still not going to be given the same rewards. You're still not going to be on the same plane as these people who accepted Islam before you. And this is something, again, it's something that's really not biblical when you look at particularly when you look at the Gospels. So in Matthew 20:16, let me go there. And Matthew 20, Jesus uses a parable, and he begins by saying, "For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard." So the hired laborers, this parable, it basically ends with everyone who was laboring, um, uh, from the first hour to the last. So in verse 6 it says, "And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came out that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more. And they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good men of the house, saying, Those who have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto thee this last, even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. So the idea in Islam of having these tiers of Muslims and um, of like super Muslims and very and Muslims who are lacking in some way. It's very ingrained in Islam. This hierarchy of you being rewarded according to how early you accepted Islam, or how receptive you were to Islam. This is something that's ingrained in the Quran, and it's something that's rejected when you actually look at scripture and the idea of the first being last, and the last first. And you can see this throughout the Gospels. So you see this again in Mark when James uh, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him, saying, Master, we should that thou shouldest do for us whatever we shall desire. And he said unto them, What would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, Grant unto us that we may sit one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand in thy glory. But Jesus said unto them, Ye know not what ye ask. Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And Jesus said unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized withal shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to him, and saith unto them, You know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. So the idea he's trying to convey here is that it's not about earthly or even like heavenly rewards. The idea, you shouldn't be seeking to please God in order to gain some in order to gain rewards. That shouldn't be the goal. That's a result of serving God, but that's not something that should be in the center of your mind when you go out and perform good deeds or good deeds or aught. But in Islam, it takes the exact opposite approach. The the idea of being rewarded and given something. This is a central feature of Islamic doctrine, and it's why you see all of these carrots and sticks Muhammad offered to his followers in order to get them to follow him. And it's a fundamentally anti unbiblical message when you actually read the scripture and and see what Jesus was and is the Lord of everything, and yet he came here as a servant. And this was a concept that was completely foreign to Muhammad. So in verse 11, it says, Have you not seen those who become hypocrites? They say to those of their brethren who disbelieve from among the followers of the book, If you are driven forth, we shall certainly go forth with you, and we will never obey anyone concerning you. And if you are fought against, we will certainly help you, and Allah bears witness that they are most surely liars. Certainly, if these are driven forth, they will not go forth with them, and if they are fought against, they will not help them. And even if they help them, they will certainly turn their backs. Then they shall not be helped. And this is ironic considering all of the treaties that Muhammad broke during his time in Medina, and the backstabbing that he did in order to acquire power. In 13, it says, You were certainly greater in being feared in their hearts than Allah. That is because they are a people who do not understand. They will fight against you in a body, save in fortified towns or from behind walls. Their fighting between them is severe. You may think them as one body, and their hearts are disunited. That is because they are people who have no sense. And to a certain extent, the latter portion of this verse is accurate, because the opponents of Muhammad actually were very disparate and disunited in their opposition. One of the reasons being that they didn't recognize the threat that Muhammad posed militarily. But the first part where he says they will not fight against you in a body, save in fortified towns or from behind walls, you have Allah basically criticizing his opponents for adopting sound military tactics, which is absurd when you think about it. In fact, Muhammad, one of the most famous battles he engaged in was called the Battle of the Trench, because he and his followers built trenches in order to gain a tactical advantage over his opponents. In 15, it says, like those before them, shortly they tasted the evil result of their affair, and they shall have a painful punishment, like the shaitan when he says to men, disbelieve. But when he disbelieves, he says, I am surely clear of you. Surely I fear Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Therefore, the end of both of them is that they are both in the fire to abide therein, and this is the reward of the unjust. O you who believe, be careful of your duty to Allah, and let every soul consider what it has sent on for the morrow, and be careful of your duty to Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. And again, this is something that's repeated throughout the Quran. And be not like those who forsook Allah, so He made them forsake their own souls. That it is that are the transgressors. Not alike are the inmates of the fire and the dwellers of the garden. The dwellers of the garden, they that are the achievers. Had we sent down this Quran on a mountain, you would certainly have seen it falling down, splitting asunder because of the fear of Allah. And we set forth these parables to men that they may reflect. And I already explained in an earlier video how the parables of the Quran are not real parables. They're basically, well, I mean, some of them are tautologies, but others are are just simply statements that Muhammad made. But also this idea that if we had sent the Quran down on a mountain, you would certainly have seen it falling down. This actually could be contrasted with Moses getting the law on Mount Sinai, the tablets. And here Muhammad is saying that if it had been set down on a mountain, you would certainly have seen it falling down, splitting asunder because of the fear of Allah. So you can take this as a comparison between the law as it was handed down on Mount Sinai. But the problem is the law is something that Muhammad did not really understand. This is why you have all of these carve outs and things like being able to eat camel meat or marrying the wife of your adopted son. These things that are clear violations of the law, and yet Muhammad upholds them. And also the idea that the Quran is so holy, that it's something that is eternal and pre-existent, and something that can't be disputed or claimed, or claimed to be errant. This is completely belied by the actual book you're reading. The Quran is just replete with historical and scientific and scriptural errors, but even bigger errors in terms of logic and reasoning. And these are things that anyone just picking up a copy of the Quran can see for themselves. But it's like I said, it contradicts a basic Islamic premise, this idea of Tawheed, or unification, of oneness. This is something that's completely at odds. This is one of those things. I think Greg Koukl refers to it as sibling rivalry, where you have two arguments that completely contradict each other, but you aver that both of them are true. So you have Muslims who say the Quran is eternal and it's pre-existent, it has a deity, but at the same time they'll say that Tawheed is true as well, so that there are no attributes of Allah, and if you associate anything with Allah, that's shirk. but you can't maintain both of these things at the same time. One of them, at least one of them, has to be false because they contradict each other. You can't say that the Quran is eternal and yet Allah has no attributes, and that if you attribute anything, um, that if you esteem anything alongside Allah, then that's shirk and polytheism. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. One of them has to be false, but Muslims refuse to accept that. So in 22 it says, "He is Allah, besides whom there is no God, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He's the beneficent, the merciful. He is Allah, besides whom there." And this is again, this is another example where he just repeats the same thing. He is, and you find this a lot in the Quran. The King, the Holy, the Giver of Peace, the Granter of security. So it expands a bit in this verse: "Guardian over all, the mighty, the supreme, the possessor of every greatness. Glory be to Allah from what they set up with him." So again, you have the verse the Quran contradicting itself. In one verse, you say that Muhammad says that there is only Allah, and um, and you can't set up anything with him. But two verses earlier, you say the Quran is has the same attributes of Allah. So this is another case of the Quran contradicting itself. And in 24 it says, "He is Allah, the creator, the maker, the fashioner. His are the most excellent names. Whatever is in the heavens and the earth declares his glory, and he is the mighty and the wise." So that's the final verse. But again, he's basically just saying how great Allah is, but he's providing no substantive evidence. All of the miracles he describes in the Quran are miracles that he took, that he plagiarized from the Old Testament and attributed to Allah. But he doesn't give any real evidence that Allah is deserving of all of this praise or glory, or let alone that he is uniquely deserving of worship. The only miracles he describes that are evident are Muhammad's military victories. And again, this is not a sign of this is not really a substantive sign. It's definitely not a sign that Muhammad is a prophet, because there were much more glorious military generals than Muhammad, both prior to him, during the Roman Empire, but also subsequent to him. There were generals that achieved much greater military accomplishments, much greater military feats. Okay, so that was the Banishment. The next surah is Surah 60, and then the surahs get progressively shorter until you get to the final surah, Surah 114. So hopefully we'll be finished with this by the end of next month, hopefully sometime in the new year. Very early, we'll be able to wrap it up. I'm also going to do a video about Israelism sometime, perhaps next week. And thank you everyone who joined, all of the mods and everyone else. And I will see you next time. Merry Christmas.